I love the idea of putting prices on our website for mowing and plowing, but the size ranges on lawns and driveways is huge in my area. For instance, our smallest lawn is 2,000 square feet and our largest is 200,000. Driveways range from 42 feet long to 1,500 feet long. We have a complicated formula for pricing snow plowing, and we compare similar lawns to get the timing correct for mowing prices. Mowing pricing is exacerbated further by the terrain in our area. For example, 20,000 square feet from one customer takes 0.45 hours, another takes 0.97 hours. So we couldn't price by size accurately. Is there a solution I'm missing other than drive-by estimates? We can do satellite most of the time, as we know the area very well, but it's not instant pricing like you're suggesting. All right, so a couple things. Let me first say that doing over-the-phone estimates is a huge step up from doing drive-by estimates. Drive-by estimates are a huge step up from doing in-person estimates where you talk to every customer for an hour. So you're already significantly down the path in terms of systemization and optimization. So don't beat yourself up too much if you're not going to take it all the way to instant pricing. I will say this. Yes, your smallest is 2,000 and your largest is 200,000, but where are 80% of your customers? I would happen to believe that 80% of your customers are between 5,000 and let's call it 40,000 or 50,000. And so my question is, could I do pricing to them, but then have an option for anyone else that's outside of those ranges to be able to get a pricing in person, to be able to save myself 80% of my time? And so that's when we do like our small, medium, and large. I'm not going after the edge cases that are like super large because it's a small percentage of my customers and I just have it where like I will do an in-person estimate for them. And so I'm trying to capture 80% of my customers and not have to go to them at all, not have to pay for an admin to answer the phone. Like if you can just reduce the drive time of drive-by estimates and your time going out and doing the estimate, but also not need an admin person to be reactive on the phone call and be sitting around waiting for a phone to ring all day, and it doesn't cost you a single penny more to have the instant pricing, we have a win. We have a win on our hand, boys and girls. So I understand this pricing variability, but if I can get on the property, the very worst thing that happens is that you change the price. All right, so play it out. Right, like what's the worst thing that happens? The first mow or the first plow, you get it wrong. Your first visit, we are going to charge by the minute anyways. So we're going to take our time to get it up to standards. For example, if it's mowing, we're going to edge, we're going to double cut if we have to, we're going to do everything possible to get it dialed in. If the pricing that we have given is way off, like there's hills and mountains and cars parked in the middle of the lawn or some crazy area that they were completely wrong on in terms of selecting their price, then we will change the price. That happens to 1%, less than 1% of the lawns that we do at Augusta Lawn Care. But as again, we attack the 80% and the other 20%, like when it says, hey, if your lawn doesn't look like any of these 3 pictures, click here. And people that have massive properties or commercial projects or something crazy, they'll click on that one. So just realize, be okay with the fact that the very worst is you change the price. The very best is that they select $79 and you're like, man, I would charge $59 for this, and you rock and roll. And then also, if you're in growth mode and you're willing to not have as much profit for a little bit, do it for 3 or 4 or 5 months, grow to capacity, raise prices on that customer, and bring them up to where they should be at. And then we all make more money. Alejandro Mejia and Haida Lawn Care. Hey, Mike, I have 2 marketing questions. Here in Plano, Texas, I opened up 90 clients last year at peak to this March around 70. Okay. We dropped 10,000 door hangers this week and have only gained 4 clients from it. I believe it's because there are instant quote door hangers with a 7-day call to action and the grass is still brown, but will be green up by the end of March and beginning growing around April. We have left 40,000 door hangers. Ready. Should I just wait till April to drop them? For every 1,000 door hangers, I expect 3 mowing clients last year within the same week of drop. And this was during mid to late spring till midsummer. I wanted to ask for your thoughts on how to roll out marketing this spring and when to know how to dump everything you got. Last year, me and friends dropped around 17,000 door hangers and gained 80 mowing customers. So I thought I had a good grasp, but this was a good learning mistake for the future. This was the first time I was ready with quick and early marketing since last year. I began closer to April. I believe I mistook beginning of spring for spring rush. What are your thoughts on that? What makes good branding piece, and your thoughts on dumping that a month before a call to action piece? Okay, here we go. So this revolves around timing. I will first and foremost say that timing your spring rush gets better with time. What I mean by that is like you seeing more and more spring rushes gets you better and better equipped to be able to time spring rush better. What I mean by that is you'll have to anticipate the demand of spring rush in order to accurately be able to know how many people to hire, how many trucks to have, how much equipment to have, and how much marketing you're going to be spending. Doing that once or twice, you do not know your demand curve because it's going to change based upon the weather. And so, even if you have an indoor service, it's still dramatically impacted by the weather because that's what people start to think about it. So, for example, the weather gets better and janitorial goes up for spring cleaning, so indoors. And so, I will say that instead of trying to drop everything in 1 week, what I would, because you're gambling, what I would do is I would take 40,000 door hangers. I'd do over the course of 8 weeks, and then I would figure out my demand curve. Because if you tracked over the course of 8 weeks and you did 5,000 door hangers per week, now all of a sudden you have 8 weeks where you'd actually be able to see how many customers you got and what peak demand or peak of spring rush is. Now, to your point, when the grass starts growing, for example, or when demand starts, most people jump too soon if you're targeting lowest customer acquisition cost. So if you're targeting lowest customer acquisition cost, you don't actually start marketing when pain begins. You market when there's peak pain, when the demand is highest. That is not when the grass starts growing. That is 3, 4, 5 weeks into spring when the grass is now overgrown and people have the highest form of pain and the highest demand for your services. They have the highest pain if they don't accept your estimate. So we can see like the time to accept an estimate, assuming you don't do it over the phone or do it instantly. If you don't, and you're just sending it via email and text, it takes you significantly longer to get a response when the customer's not in pain, when their grass is not overgrown, when their trees are not falling like on their house. They have less pain, and therefore they will take longer to accept. And so I will also say, if you're going to do door hangers a week, 2 weeks into the spring, when half the people their lawn isn't overgrown, just kind of starting to grow, you might want to extend the 7-day window to more like 14 or 21 days. That being said, we do consistently see people that even with door hangers, will submit a picture 14, 21. I saw one the other day, 28 days later. So you might want to change your expiration date if this is a big problem for you. If you're trying to preload the spring rush, and knowing very well that, hey, you might be 3 or 4 weeks early, you're going to have a lower customer acquisition cost. Sorry, you're going to have a higher customer acquisition cost because your conversion rate is going to be lower. However, you could kind of help that by saying, hey, this door hanger is valid for 3 weeks. It's valid for 4 weeks, knowing that people might keep the door hanger and then contact you during peak pain. Really good question. All I will say is this. I have done a spring rush this is my 18th spring rush. Every single spring rush, I have been heavily involved in the lawn care landscape industry. It is only now that I can with confidence know, okay, this is when I market. This is when I advertise. This is when I start hiring people. And it took probably 5 years to know that because it always shifts 2, 3, 4 weeks sometimes. Like if you have, in our market, like we could have been mowing like hardcore right now, and we also a couple years ago had snow like a week ago. So like you got to be able to adjust and know when that happens, and then even know when it comes down. Like if you're doing door hangers too late into the spring rush, now all of a sudden everyone's been set up. They've experienced peak pain, but most of them found a provider, and now the only people you're going to start getting from door hangers are the people that are unsatisfied with their current provider. I will also say the vast majority of people I see doing marketing are going after the wrong customer. All right. At the beginning of spring, you have a higher percentage of people that are, for the very first time, setting up service. I'm just going to use lawn care for an example, but any home service, whether it be cleaning, cleaning a pool, cleaning a carpet, cleaning anything, or mowing lawn. Let's use mowing lawn, for example. It's not like someone wakes up when they're 75 years old after having not mowed their grass since they were 60 years old and wakes up and realizes that they're saving time by not mowing their grass and they can go play golf. So you spending money on marketing about getting your weekend back is not going to be appealing to them after the very first time they decided to not mow the grass themselves. And so realize that the vast majority of our customers, assuming you're on some sort of recurring service, assuming that you're targeting especially an older demographic, even if the economy starts to shift, they're not going to wake up and decide to clean out their gutters. So to market to them as if they're saving time, although that is a value proposition that we have as a service business, is that we do save our customers time. But that being the value proposition, thinking that you're going to get new customers that way, you are going after a demographic that's very small. Because once that person makes a decision for someone else to mow their grass and they call around lawn care providers when they're 60 years old, you're marketing them the same way for the next 15 years. They're 75 now. They haven't mowed their grass in 15 years. They're not even thinking about the possibility of them doing it instead of playing golf. And so the vast majority of your customers will not come from people that decided to not mow their grass, that decided to not clean out their pool, that decided to not trim the bushes themselves. The vast majority of your customers are going to come from people that have used other providers and they didn't show up. They have used other providers that were not professional. They used other providers that didn't have cards on file. They were tired of someone not showing up. These are the type of pain points you should actually speak to when it comes to marketing. Because the vast majority of people, now that they have their lawn mowed for 15 years, the only reason they'll switch is not because they decided to pick it up and do it themselves now. They're physically incapable of it. It's a fact that they are tired of someone not showing up, being unprofessional, etc. So speak to that in your marketing. I will also say that at the beginning of Spring Rush is the really only period of time I see you getting the type of customer that's for the very first time ever deciding to use a service. After the Spring Rush, 6, 8, 12 weeks in, people have solved this pain point. Unless they have not cleaned their house in 3 years, unless they have not mowed their lawn the entire past year, and then now it's overgrown, it's a jungle. Unless that's the case, they have used another service. So market to those pain points and not to the pain points of a new customer. All right, first, our next one up, Nathan and Kyle Hart from Hart and Sons Landscape. We recently took on 2 clients that are slightly out of our service area, but they're larger contracts, and we decided to charge extra for drive time. Do you recommend that we give extra budget hours for the crew that has to make that longer drive? Or would that be confusing for them as it gives them an inaccurate amount of time the job should be completed? This also applies to mulch jobs as well. Normally we add drive time to pick up the mulch since it's often so busy at the time and takes up to an hour sometimes. Mercy. It maybe is misleading to the crew because they think they have more time than they actually do. If we don't add budget hours, then the crew's efficiency score for that day is always lower and they don't get a bonus. Okay, so so if you're doing pay for performance, your budget hours need to be accurate. Now, if you're not doing pay for performance, this really does not matter. You're charging a customer an amount, you're paying the crew by the hour, no one cares. Now, you'd have a whole different argument as to whether or not it's efficient for them to be driving this far or going an hour away from mulch, etc. But when it comes to pay for performance, we do need to take into account the drive time. Now, do I pay them for drive time? No. But if I'm going to make them drive an hour away, but only do budget hours for the 3-hour job they're going to be at, they will never be able to make P for P and above base pay. So you'll have to bake it in. This is why small service areas, you don't even have to think about this stuff. Like if I'm driving more than just a few minutes from house to house, we have a big problem. And so if you're going to randomly take 2 customers way away, yes, I'm gonna inflate the budget hours if I'm on pay for performance to make sure my crew can get above base pay. Because the last thing you want is they know there's no way in the world they're gonna be able to make base pay, not because the budget hours are accurate, but because the drive time's so long, they're just burning time and they'll get mad at you. So what's nice about pay for performance, it keeps you honest. It prevents you from doing bad business behaviors like getting a random couple customers way outside your service area because your crew will get mad at you because they'll start figuring out they don't make any money if you're doing services that far away. So if you're going to, I would beef up the budget hours for them. Blaze from Bellamy's. Can we please have a new visit created prompt and Zapier added? Thank you. You can do this if you go to the chat, you can do a feature request. And yeah, I'm guessing there's a new visit. I think there's several other, yes, I see what you're saying. Okay. So visit would be like an actual, a job. So feel free to submit this as a trigger and, in the, feature request. Montez Williams from Ace Project. What are your other steps to set up a client for recurring visits, not just one-time visits? So if you are setting up a job like you would for a one-time job, there's simply just a toggle to make it a recurring job. Now, I will say this, after seeing a lot of accounts inside of Copilot, the vast majority of people are not using off seasons. And I personally think that's crazy. Here's why. With an off season, the reason we did this is if you are setting up recurring services and you have an off season at all. Now, some people say, well, I don't have an off season. I start mowing. I'm just going to use mowing for an example. We do monthly visits during the winter, and then we do weekly during the rest of the season. Great. If I was you, I would set up 2 recurring visits, one for the winter season, one for the rest of the season. One would be weekly, the other would be monthly. And then I'll have an off season that correlates with each of those different timing and schedules. For the vast majority of people that actually will stop for 3, 4, 5 months of the year, when you set up the recurring service, I'm going to tick the boxes as indefinite visits. If you check that, it means you will never have to set up that service again. And if you set up the off season, it'll just automatically pause that recurring service for that off season. Okay. Now, if you tried this like a year ago and it was buggy, just know that's been fixed now. Okay, so if we first launched off seasons, there was trouble when you would change the off season, it would not reflect and actually add hundreds of visits like it should. For example, we have like three, four, 500 mowing visits scheduled. All of a sudden, you realize it's October. You're like, man, it's warm. I need to extend my mowing season by 2 weeks. Okay, what you're going to do is you're going to go to the off season, and now instead of having to add 300 visits one by one by one, you're going to just change the off season from November 1st to November 15th. And when you do that, it's going to add any appropriate visits for that recurring service for the next 2 weeks if the timing is appropriate. And so, I don't see a lot of people using this. It will save you dozens of hours. The larger you get, the more it'll save you in terms of starting or stopping service at the end of the season and starting it up back at the beginning of the season again. Also, the reason it's so important because I see so many people when they start service up again, they forget several customers until it's 4 or 5 weeks into the season, and they're like, "Oh my word!" The customer usually freaks out and is like, "Why haven't you been showing up at my property?" And you're like, "I totally forgot." And the reason is because you're restarting everyone's recurring service. So to answer your question more directly, Montez, when you're setting up a visit, it says this is a one-time job or recurring. Click on recurring, set the schedule you would like, and then I personally recommend, unless they've told you to stop at a certain time, make it an indefinite visit in the future and set your off season, and it'll just pause that service for that period of time. Next question from John Wiggins from Power Safe Power Washing. Quick backstory is I've been running my pressure washing business by myself for 3+ years now. I made some huge decisions recently. I'm very close to my family and recently added my brother on as a part owner with me barely holding the majority share. I've also added my sister on as almost equal parts owner. Okay, interesting. The question is not if this is a good idea. I know it sounds like a disaster waiting to happen. I'm extremely close to them and have a ton of trust as well. I didn't do this because it was a smart business move, but instead that it is something I want to do as a family. My siblings are definitely type A, and we would like to grow as quickly as possible. We are all willing and able to take very little, if not no money, out of the business. My question is, do you have any advice for me when navigating this complicated situation to not only maximize our growth, but also keep all parties on the same page and avoid complications? Okay, this is a great question. So in about probably like 5 or 6 weeks, there is a turnaround video that's coming out that'll talk a lot about this because there was a 3-person partnership. One person in kind of an ugly way had to leave, and it was really bad. It really put them through the ringer. And the business was doing, I think, $400,000 last year. They're on pace for like $600,000 this year, but it really put them in a bad spot where like they couldn't do any marketing last year because they're so far behind once this part owner bailed mid-season. And so, as much as right now you all trust each other, there can be kamikazes that come in through life. For example, one of them could have a tough breakup, for example. And if they're married to that person and all of a sudden they're going through a divorce court, they're going to try to get 50% of the equity that person holds in your business. And that could potentially lead to a liquidity event where you're like, we have to sell this business to be able to get this person, get them out of the business. Or you have to take a massive loan to buy them out. So as much as you might have really good relationship with the siblings, there are other impacts, health, for example, that could cause this to change. Now, do I think this is a bad idea? I'm not going to give my opinion on that. What I would say is prepare for it not to be this way forever. Unlike marriage, it is not till death do us part. Most business relationships, and I don't mean like 50% like marriages, but rather more like 99% of people that start in business together will eventually not be in business together. That's just the facts. Like, there are very few Charlie Mungers and Warren Buffetts that literally until the day they die are in business together and just keep going together. It is very, very rare. Most of the time, you're in business for someone for 5, 10, 15 years. These are partnerships. These are not marriages. And so what I would recommend is, like, some people spend literally 10 seconds getting a business relationship, and yet they think that's crazy if you went and got married. If you're giving someone equity in business, you are giving them a huge chunk of your like a huge amount of investment together. You're spending more time with this person than probably your spouse, and yet we just do it so flippantly. And so I would recommend creating, quote unquote, I'm going to say this mostly for the effect, a prenup for your partnership, because it's not a matter of if you will separate, it's a matter of when. And so it's not a bad thing. It's a matter of saying, like, eventually life is going to happen. One of us is going to want to move on. One of us is not going to want to be here 8, 10 hours a day. When that happens, what's going to happen? Are we gonna have to buy someone out? Are we gonna take it? So for example, I like the idea of having three independent valuations, taking the average of it, and then being like, hey, if you are wanting out and you're wanting to be bought out, there's a discount rate applied. So for example, let's just say a business is doing 500,000 annual revenue. Say, hey, when we dissolve this relationship, we're going to have three independent valuators, or we're going to come up with a valuation mechanism now based upon profitability or revenue, for example. But we're going to determine that now, either three independent valuations or a valuation mechanism based upon profit or revenue now. Great. I want out. Okay. I'm out. Like I want to move. I'm done with this business. Great. Valuations coming at $150,000. Now, I personally like that if I'm trying to get out, there's a discount rate applied. And that might be 40, 50%. So the valuation of the business is no longer 150,000. I'm wanting out, which means it puts pressure on the business to actually buy me out and the other partner, which I'm going to agree prior to getting in this partnership that there's going to be a discount rate applied of 40%. So now the business is only worth 80 or $85,000. And then if I own 50%, great. To buy you out, it's going to cost 40 grand. Doing all of that now makes it to where everyone knows what's happening. There's never hard feelings. The business is not put in jeopardy. You're never wondering as to why someone should or should not be doing more in the business. So just think about every possible thing that could go wrong for the business. What happens if someone has a life event? What if someone wants to move? What if someone wants to get out of the business? What if someone only can work 3 or 4 hours a day because they have a physical issue or they have a family problem? What happens if someone needs an extended period away because of pregnancy or because they get injured? These are the type of things that need to be thought out. Now, how do you come up with all these questions? Go to ChatGPT. Be like, hey, this is the business. Here's what we're kind of doing in revenue. Ask me every single question that could possibly go wrong so we can figure out exactly how every single case would be handled. And it will give you like 20 to 50 questions that you all need to figure out. Like, what happens if someone gets divorced? What happens if someone wants to buy more equity? What happens if one person's working 16 hours a day and someone else is working 3 hours a day? How does that impact profit sharing? How does that impact equity? There's so many variables. And if you just go to it blindly, it's not a problem until you're making money. Like, no one really cares about holding equity or profit sharing in a business that doesn't make money. As soon as it starts making money, it means a lot. And that's when confrontation happens. So right now there's no confrontation because like everyone's like, I don't want money for the business. That will change. For everyone that says that, eventually that will change. And so instead of just blindly going into this, let's think about, okay, well, when that changes, how are we going to handle it? So that way, when it happens, we don't have to ruin our personal relationship. That is my 2 cents. I have a whole lot more coming out that in a turnaround show that's coming out because they were the result of this sort of collapse happening. Next question is from Morgan Latimer from Augusta Lawn Care of Jacksonville. Will archiving affect KPI data? I would like to archive estimates. So I do not know this for certain, so I do apologize. Morgan, feel free to reach out to ATC and they can probably test this for you very quickly, just by like archiving one, seeing if it changes in the KPIs. Personally, I don't usually archive estimates, mostly because I don't know if it actually even impacts us, but it might say archived as a status when the customer goes and looks at it, and I don't want them being like, oh, I can't accept it. Now down the road, there might be like, we could have estimates that automatically get archived based upon like an expiration date. But for now we don't have that. But I do not know this for certain. So reach out to Air Traffic Control, Morgan, in the support, and they can certainly see if that is the case and whether or not it impacts your close ratio and other KPIs. I would venture to believe that it does not, in terms of like changing things like close ratio on your KPI cockpit. Mike DeLugas from Attaboy Lawns. Hey, Mike, I'm trying out a new, very small marketing agency because a large one we were using just kept pushing me off and wouldn't help us get our CAC down. The cost just kept climbing and climbing. It seemed like we just got lost in the massive system no matter how many times I brought the issue up. The new guy is sending all paid leads to a landing page as a way to keep customers from getting lost on the main site. I do see this as a possible issue. However, I am wondering if there is some perverse incentive, lack of education, or other motive. Maybe I'm wrong. This is the correct way it should be done. I need a little insight on this matter, as I am currently of the opinion that my paid ads will help me build a long-term SEO, and I would rather have them go to the main site. Thanks for everything, Mike DeLugas. Okay, great question. Really good question. Okay, so here's the stakes. You're driving traffic to your main website, which will help, in part, your SEO, because you're driving a whole bunch of traffic to it. It starts to rank better for certain keywords, etc. Very cool. Now, also kind of depends. If this person is driving traffic to a completely different domain, I kind of have a problem with that because then I have no domain authority whatsoever. If they're doing it to like a different page, so for example, like if it's like attaboylawns.com and instead of that, it's going to like attaboylawns.com/estimate, then I'm okay with it because at least you're getting domain authority. That's fine. Um, and I'm assuming they're probably hiding it from search engines so less people get to it by just Google search, but rather like, you can't find it in the search engine. It has to be direct traffic. Now, the advantage for them having this is it's really easy to track. You could theoretically get away with not even have to put a Google tracking code behind this one because you know any lead that comes from this landing page is from the Google ads because you hit it from any sort of it's disconnected from the website, it's disconnected from Google search. So basically any lead that comes in from this landing page, you know it came from them. The reason this is important is because if you just ran traffic to your main site, even if you have a Google tracking code or you have a Facebook pixel, for example, there are times that because of privacy inside the browser, that tracking code never gets hit. And so what will happen sometimes is, and this is why like companies like Hyros exist, is they do tracking simply due to the fact that Facebook pixels and Google tracking codes sometimes don't actually get hit. And there's a argument for 20 to 50% of your leads are not actually hitting those tracking codes, and therefore it makes it look like your customer acquisition cost or cost per lead is much higher because you don't have correct tracking in place. So that is sometimes why having a separate landing page is nice, is because it allows you to know with certainty that if I am hiding this page from my website and I'm hiding it from SEO or Google, if I'm hiding it and people can't get to this, I know every single lead that comes through this landing page is going to be a valid lead from that ad campaign, and I can have a very accurate way of measuring my cost per lead. So yeah, there's a trade-off here. It's either A, better, easier tracking, or B, I lose out on a little bit of SEO, traffic to my website, ranking for my domain, etc. And that does mean something over the course of time, right? So I know this because even at Augusta, like we've gone from where sites take 2 to 3 months to rank on the first page of Google to literally 2 to 3 days in most of our smaller markets. And the reason is because that domain, AugustaLongStores.com, has authority because so much traffic has been to it over the course of years. So I don't think in the short term this is going to affect you, Mike, but I think long term, I would be careful if I was driving like 80% of my traffic to these paid sources that are not my main site, because then when it makes it, what the problem with this is they own that landing page. I'm assuming it's a different domain, it's a completely separate thing. If that's the case, they own it, which now they kind of have you handcuffed, and that's what most agencies like to do. Nothing against them; they're trying to do a good business model, but what you want to be careful of is all of your traffic flowing through another source, and you're basically handcuffed. And you know if you turn that off, that all of your leads are gone. And now because you haven't built up the SEO and the traffic to your main site, like if you turn that off, it's literally 50, 60, 70% of your leads are now gone. They know they kind of have you. And I don't think they're being malicious. This is just business practice. And it's like, I want to give you good reporting. And that's, I'm a fan of them. Because if they just blindly send traffic to your website, I don't really trust them. So it's better but just be careful with having golden handcuffs because they could build up a lot of your lead flow as you grow the business on top of that lead flow. And then okay, we had 100 leads last month and 80 of them came from their site. I don't want to be paying $3-4 grand a month to them, but I kind of got it because now I've built this whole business on the infrastructure and the back end of having that many leads to replace churn. Kevin Lupardo from Lawn Domination. Hey Mike, this season we are doubling our mowing and fertilizing accounts. I just hired 2 full-time employees and have 2 part-time employees in case someone doesn't show up. Having issues trying to figure out budget hours and Copilot. Currently, when adding the job to schedule, I add how much time it takes 2 guys to complete the job. Each employee should be 8 to 10 hours a day of work minus drive time. If they each work 8 hours in the 10-hour day, they should I book 16 budget hours each day or leave each day to 8 hours for them? I want to make sure I'm not overbooking. It was way easier last year with 1 employee. Okay, this is a great question. So I will say first that the Field Force app that the Customer Advisory Board has been looking at and been getting really good feedback on is going to be much simpler designed for field workers. Right now, the current app has a lot of functionality, but it's web-based. It doesn't work for an offline, and the design is not optimized for just like doing jobs. There's all this other stuff that you're able to do. We are not like getting away with the current one, but we will add the option for Field Force app, which will allow your crew members to be much more simplified, and the design of even budget hours will be much better in terms of them just viewing it. I will say this though, Kevin, that is, do not think of budget hours as how long it takes the crew to do the job. Think of it how long it takes one person to do the job. The software will automatically know that if there's two people on a job and there's 4 budget hours, that it should take 2 hours for them to get the job done. All right. So think of it always in terms of one person on this job site. How long will it take? And if there's 2 people, great, it'll half it. And if there's 3 people in the job, it'll take it by a third, like cut it into thirds. So always think of budget hours. How long will it take for one person to do the job? And if you're like, well, it has to be done with 4 people. Great. How long will it take 4 people? It's going to take 10 hours for this crew to do this project. Great. And there's 4 people, 40 budget hours. Right. So, and that was what I'd be entering into Copilot to get accurate tracking, especially if you're connected to PvP software, because then everything will come across actually how much they're getting paid correctly. Jeremy from Klein Lawn Care and Snow Plowing. Congratulations, happy couple. May your marriage be filled with love, joy, and God's blessings as you embark on this new chapter together. May your love for each other, like the love of Christ for the church, be everlasting. Thank you very much. Okay. What should an operations manager position look like for 400 to 500,000 on a business that has never filled that role other than the owner? What are the most effective ways to get someone up for success in that position and set clear expectations spelled out? And which should those expectations be? Okay, so I would need a little bit more information on this, Jeremy, because I don't know if you are what your pricing looks like. Because usually at $400,000 to $500,000, I would say you can't afford an operations manager. However, if you grew the business to 300,000 with like 150 customers, and then you raised prices aggressively, and you're like top of the market, you can actually make money doing this. So usually you don't need a full-time operations manager. Now, what I would say in terms of this role at 400,000 to 500,000 is this does not require a full-time overhead position. The reason I say that is because to get a really, really good operations manager, especially if you want this person to run the business without you, they need to have incentive to be able to make good money. And they just call it $80,000 on a $400,000 business. That's 20%. And so it's very difficult to have a 20% overhead if that person doesn't generate any revenue. So personally, the number one thing I'm looking at is completing 30 budget hours of work every single week. So if they have 0 estimates and 0 in-person training and interviews, then I expect 30 budget hours of work in the week. And I go down 1 hour for every in-person estimate and for every in-person training or interview that they have to do for hiring the team. So sales and the other aspects of hiring. Now, the reason I do that is because I know that on the other side of the coin, I am trying to do what? Reduce the amount of in-person estimates with instant pricing and over the phone estimates, so I can drive that number down, make them more efficient. Like the number one reason I do instant pricing is to keep my general manager from being out driving around making no money and actually burning money, and instead generating revenue in the business. But the only way to make sure this happens is keep them accountable to budget hours of how much work is expected of them. So we expect 30 budget hours of work in this size of business. And then if you got 5 in-person estimates this week, great. 25 budget hours expected. Oh, you have to do 2 interviews and you did half a day of training? Great. We're going to bring that down to 20 budget hours for this week is what now is expected. Instead of just being like, yeah, like I filled my day with follow-ups and I did some estimates, I did some training. And you actually boil it down. They actually did like 10 estimates the whole week. They hired 1 person and they did a little bit of training. It's like, well, how do I measure this? Use budgeted hours. And then have a metric that every single week we're going to sit down and say, hey, how many budget hours you complete? We start at 30 budget hours, which is like a 40-hour work week if they were just working out in the field. But then, hey, yes, you are expected to still do sales, in-person estimates. You're expected to lead the team and hire them, et cetera. It's all part of the job. I bake in 25% for things like team meetings and getting the shop set up in the morning, et cetera. That's why it's 30 budget hours and not 40. So, yeah, that's our expectations. I need, at that size of business, they have to be producing revenue. That is the difference between what we say in our training for Augusta is like the difference between a profitable location at 500,000 and a very unprofitable location at 500,000 is what percentage of the time of the quote unquote GM or operations manager is spent in the field. Because you can get a location that has 500,000 in revenue and the general manager works their tail off 30 budget hours out in the field every single week. They do, an estimate 1 or 2 a day at the end of the day. And they interview people a couple times throughout the spring rush. But operations are smooth. And you can take that location and the general manager produce $100,000 in revenue for the business, in addition to doing everything in terms of task wise, easily. If you're charging $100 per hour, that is literally 1,000 budget hours per year. So if you rewind the clock on that. That's 20 budget hours per week. If you charge $100 per hour and you have a 20 budget hours of work on the schedule for your general manager, they will produce $100,000 in revenue. They will pay for their wages. The difference between that and then someone else that runs a very unprofitable business at the same exact size is simply the delta between the person that makes 100,000 out in the field, that's your profit margin essentially, and the person who makes nothing because they're straight overhead and they dink around in their truck all day long. Or maybe they don't. Maybe they hustle and work hard, but you have really bad route density. You have projects that go way over budget hours all the time. You're doing services that are not simplified or standardized. You have no software. Like, this is the difference between a very profitable, 15 to 25% profit margin net business from a $500,000 level and the business that loses 10%, loses $50,000 a year at the same exact size. Robbie from Weed Whackers Lawn Care. How we handle instant quote when it comes in, we set up an estimate for weekly and biweekly service and accept whichever one they choose, and then attach a picture of instant quote to their file. If a customer opts for a service change, like switching from weekly service at $50 to a biweekly service of $75, we can offer proof to support our pricing decisions. However, how do you handle if they call and accept the price over the phone? We have follow-up phone calls and emails, but sometimes we don't get the picture. We don't send a text because they not able to send a picture by text in Copilot. We have lost customers in past because of this. Okay, got what you're saying. Cool. So this is what I would do. First off, I would have them submit, if possible, the QR code. Instead of sending a picture to email, I would have a QR code on your door hanger. That's what we're talking about, right? Door hangers. Yeah. So if instant pricing from, I see. This is instant pricing. 1 second. Give me 1 second. Oh, so you're saying people are on your website and they call you. It's very rare that happens. When people see the instant pricing on the website and they don't finish the form. So maybe you're talking about door hangers. If you're talking about door hangers, I recommend a QR code going to a form that they fill out. Because once they're on the form, we rarely see them not fill it out. So all of that to say, we still send an estimate to the customer once they accepted instant pricing. That way it's inside their customer profile, as well as we say, hey, just so you know, it's accepted, we mark it accepted, and we send it to them. We do this so that way they see that they accepted weekly and bi-weekly at those prices. Also, we personally, I'm not saying this is what everyone should do, this is what we do. We put the weekly and bi-weekly price in the description of a line item and put it in one line item. So when they accept mowing, they're also accepting the other price. I don't want them to choose between weekly and bi-weekly. I assume weekly unless they specifically tell me otherwise. But if they accept mowing, it's going to be set up for weekly, and we put it in our description. Hey, between March and May, you are required to be on weekly. I know I get like 90% of my mowing customers during that time anyways, and very few of them switch to bi-weekly. But if they do, they have accepted a line that literally says weekly and bi-weekly prices. If they switch to bi-weekly, I have it accepted on the estimate what the pricing should be. So we still do this for instant pricing, and that is customer accepts the bid. We're still going to send them the estimate. It's that way. It's in their profile. They've seen it. We have record that they've seen it with the email hook. I do recommend. Next up is from Thorsten from Anytime Lawn Care Services. This is my first year in the lawn care business, and I was wondering what your onboarding for new customers looks like. Do you have them sign anything or accept a terms of service agreement? Please walk me through your whole onboarding process for new customers. So I'm not going to spend time, especially for lawn care, trying to get someone to agree to terms of service or sign a long contract or even get a signature. The reason is because I'm adding friction to a process that is just too much of a pain in the butt. And so, yeah, like I just adding friction, it hurts sales. And so if you're trying to optimize for profitability, you add friction. For example, you would add every single person will get a card on file. That will reduce your close ratio somewhat, slightly, but it'll reduce it somewhat. If you require 100% deposit on all projects over $10, it'll also reduce your close ratio. If you also require prepayment on all services that are going to be offered this coming month, you will also reduce your close ratio. If you require a 12-month contract with a signature, you will also reduce your close ratio. These things that will help your cash flow. These things will help you be more profitable. These things will help a lot of things in terms of seasonality. The question is, which are you trying to optimize for? Are you trying to optimize for growth or profit? So if you're in growth mode, which sounds like you're in your first year of business, I'm going to reduce those filters. I'm going to reduce the friction, get as many people in the door, and then when you hit capacity, you're like, I like the size of the business, now let's make it profitable. That's when I'm going to start adding in these other layers. I'm going to do price increases. I'm going to require a I might do a $50 consulting charge to do the estimate. That will reduce your estimates by like 80 or 90%. So if you're tired of tire kickers, you'll implement that, but you won't do it if you're trying to grow. But if you're like, I don't want any more of these estimates and I only want to do them if I'm going to close every single job, great. Add a $100 design consulting fee that gets applied to the estimate. And all of a sudden, your estimates will drop by like 80 or 90%. But they'll be like 100% close ratio. So you'd be much more in profit mode doing that activity. So adding friction to the sales process in any way, shape, or form will reduce your close ratio, but ultimately usually increases your profits and your cash flow and reduces your seasonality. So it's a trade-off, and most of the time I recommend if you're first getting started, get as many customers, do a great job, and that way when you raise prices and you add friction, they don't want to leave. Jonathan from Amory Lawn Care. Number one, I was wondering if you've come across this issue before. I don't have a physical location for my business, and my Google business profile was immediately suspended after submitting my verification video. I've gone through all the guidelines, submitted multiple appeals with tons of evidence, and even asked in forums, but I keep getting the same response about a quality guideline issue with no clear explanation. Okay, so you can just do a service area, and you'll get around this. If you're verifying an address, that's when you have to do the video. So you could just do service area. Now, do I recommend that? No, I would rather you have an actual address. So I would do my best to get to a commercial spot. I know some people they'll rent offices, like what's it called? Give me a second. It's going to come. Co-working offices. You can rent them for like $100 a month, get an address that you can send mail to, and verify then. And I would put up my little sign. I would park my truck in front of the thing, and to prove the video in the video. Sounds like to me right now you don't have a physical location, but you're trying to verify an address. So yeah, you're probably not gonna get through. So co-working space, rent some space out that actually has an address with a mailbox, etc. Put your sign out in the window. Better yet, put it inside the ground. Drive by, or put your trucks out there. Park your trailers. You could do that. Otherwise, if you just wanted to get the account set up, I would just do no physical location. I would do service areas only. It does hurt your SEO a little bit because you don't show up on the map as often, and it doesn't. Your Google listing is affected a little bit. At this point, I'm not sure how it's wrong or how to fix it. Do you have any insight or advice what I should do next? I really appreciate any guidance. Number two, I started my business back in January as a single member LLC, and at the time, there was no Augusta franchisees in my area. However, I recently noticed an Augusta website has launched for my area, and I'm wondering how I can effectively compete with them. Any advice or strategies would be greatly appreciated. Yes, this is the reason Augusta exists. It's not because we try to beat people. It's because this is why Augusta Nation exists, is this question. And that is, you're going to need to create a great website. You're going to be professional. You're going to answer your phone. You're going to be able to continue to use the software like you're doing, and you will compete just fine. There's so much work out there. It's such a small percentage of the residential lawn care market that we actually tackle. Like it's tiny, even at 50 some odd million in revenue. Like it's so tiny compared to the billions of dollars that it's in this industry. So like there's no problem with the market. It's a matter of when you see this happen, this is exactly the thoughts I want you to think, because you will need to think these thoughts. Okay, if I'm going to compete effectively with them, how do I do it? Okay, well, their pricing is instant. Okay, great. They offer pay for performance. Okay, I need to figure out that system so I can attract good talent. I need to have a great website. I need to use software. It's not because I'm trying to beat anyone. I'm trying to beat the person that is not willing to change those systems in their business. The person that doesn't want to pay their employees a P4P, that doesn't want to do open book management, that doesn't care about their employees and treats them like trash, that doesn't have wrapped trucks or uniforms or professional staff or insurance. Like, that is who I'm trying to attack. So just the fact you answer this question, there will be plenty of work for you, and you will crush it, and I hope you succeed. Just continue to watch the content, implement systems, do what's best for the customer, treat the customer right, and you will do fantastically.